I'm going to be talking about the work that we do, just an overview of how we use machine listening methods to try and work with bird sounds. And so the context for this is my 5-year fellowship project, which is based at Queen Mary University of London. In zoology and in some other environments, there are people trying to sort of make inroads into this. Very few coming at it from, say, the signal processing machine learning background. So, why should we? Right. So firstly, it has important applications. It has applications. I'm really grateful that I'm following on from some introductions from archivists and archive managers, because you've already heard about archiving, and there's all this potential in archives, and the same is true for animal sound archives. The British Library has a lot of recordings. They also have boxes and boxes of things they want to digitise. And so it's certainly important for data mining and archives. It's also important for monitoring. There are now lots of monitoring projects which monitor bird sounds live. Also important in comparative linguistics. Bird song in particular, because birds learn their song analogously to the way humans learn their song. That's become an important analogy in the biological sciences to be studied to understand where human language came from, for example. So, there are applications for it. There are reasons why you might give someone a grant to do some analysis of bird sounds. But I also want to emphasise that it's a great research challenge. So bird song as an object of study for someone who does signal processing and machine learning like me, it's absolutely fascinating. All of us know how fascinating bird sounds are, and it does not become trivial if you're a signal processing machine learning person. There are still so many mysteries to be unravelled, let alone what the birds are saying to each other. I'm not trying to guess the meaning here, at least not yet. But to analyse these time series and to make sense of them, to organise them, to develop the algorithms that are going to help us make sense of bird sounds. So that's why, and that's why I think we should all be analysing bird sounds. One of the first things you might think of, and one of the things that we often talk about, is bird species classification. So if I take a bird sound recording and I want to know what species of bird was that, if you talk to a machine learning person, they will say, well, that's just a classification task. This is it follows the form of things that are quite standard in machine learning. Here is some data. I want a label, and a hardcore machine learning person will not worry too much about what the data is. But it turns out in order to get this process to work, you really do have to spend some time with the material itself and get some at least some intuition about how you're going to take the data and transform it into something that the algorithms are going to be able to work with. This is the feature representation in machine learning terms. What I've got here on the screen are just some little fragments. They're about 20 milliseconds each, and what this represents is the way our current algorithm analyzes large volumes of bird sounds and extracts regularities. These patterns are like little templates for what tends to happen in general in bird sounds. These features, such as here we have like a tiny little chirp of sound going downwards, but it's a harmonic chirp, and it's the particularities that come out that are different between music and speech and bird song, for example. So this relates a little bit to Tim's question: can music analysis tools be used sort of transparently for speech analysis? And the answer is yes and no. I certainly found that for analysing bird song, you can't just take speech recognition software. That's not how it works. But yes, engineering the feature representation let us get to the point where we can actually release an app where we're recognising British birds just from mobile phone recordings, and it works well enough that I was not embarrassed about releasing an app. So there we go. Moving on from there, so moving on from the classification paradigm where we just say, I want this one label for this one file, there's actually a lot of things that you can ask of an algorithm about a sound recording. So A lot of my work at the moment is moving on from the classification paradigm, trying to get some more about the structure, the detail of an audio sound scene from the algorithms. One of the tasks we're looking at is something called weakly supervised learning or weakly labeled data. This is really common in all sorts of archives. You have a recording, the recording is labeled as being Blackbird and Robin. It doesn't say where in the recording is Blackbird and Robin. So a lot of machine learning algorithms need the sort of precise labels in order to learn what they're supposed to do. But there is a paradigm called weakly supervised learning where, despite only saying this is a Blackbird and Robin in the training data, we can say, okay, the Robin is here and the Blackbird is here. This is something that my student Veronica Morphy is looking at. I won't go into the details too deeply, except to say that she's doing one method which is deep learning and one method which is not. Another aspect that we're looking at in terms of structure is, so this is collaborative with a lab at Queen Mary and also the Max Planck Institute in Germany. We have zebra finches here. If I record the sound in their environment, zebra finches like to live in groups of, say, about 50. They're sort of colonial living birds. If you take a sound recording here, you've not just got individual atomized sound events, you've got a communication network. You've got a whole lot of sort of secondary information about the social structure, about what's going on in their lives. So what we want to do is start to develop algorithms that can make inferences about what's going on in there. So just iconically we can say we've got a number of individuals in a sound scene and they're each emitting events. So roughly analogous to speech recognition, you could say we can identify these events in a sound scene. Okay, maybe, let's just take that as read, we can identify the events. But what's going on there? Are the birds ignoring each other? Are the birds talking in pairs? Are they having a big conversation? And so what we do is we developed a model in which all of the birds sort of, it's a very abstracted model, but it represents the general idea that each of the birds has their own sort of ongoing state, and they are influenced by all these different timelines of other events that they can hear. And what we do with that model then is we need to develop a model that we can then make inferences about, that we can fit to data. We take this as a mathematical model, which I'm not going to go right into, but what we do is we learn from this the sort of the time course of interactions. If my colleague in bird terms calls at time 0, how does that influence my probability of calling at time 0.2 seconds later? And an example of the kind of results we get from this, with a small group of 4 zebra finches, we find that there's a sort of influence network which is consistent from day to day. So it's actually surprising when you talk to zoologists how little they know about the animals they work with. You know, I was talking to the ornithologist. You know, so what is a zebra finch social network? And they were like, well, we don't really know. They have stable mating partners, but within a larger colony, there's very little information about the sort of network we should see. So this is starting to use machine listening technologies to get what verging on being novel insights in animal behaviour and zoology. We have a network of influence that is stable over time in this group of birds. So that was a couple of examples. Well, I started with the classification paradigm, and then I gave you a couple of examples of how we're trying to go beyond that to sort of pulling out some more structure. And yes, so this is part of, we have a group at Queen Mary called the Machine Listening Lab, where we have a mixture of machine learning people, some zoologists, mathematicians, and other things. And yes, so I've already mentioned the collaborators that were particularly involved in the zebrafinch work. I think that's all I have. Thank you very much.